This week on Eye for Iran, we're not just talking about a water crisis, we're talking about the slow unraveling of daily life. Across Iran, people are facing unbearable heat, power cuts, and dry taps. But what they're describing goes far beyond infrastructure failure. One person says, "Please help us. We are exhausted. No one listens. We are at the end of the line." Another says, "This isn't about water. This is about keeping people from the streets." Those aren't analysts or politicians. Those are ordinary Iranians speaking to us through Iran International's submissions line. In Tehran, water no longer flows past the second floor of apartment buildings. Reservoirs are nearly empty. Groundwater is depleted. And the government's response? A weekly national shutdown to reduce consumption, a plan that, according to residents, has only worsened the crisis. So we ask, is this just climate stress and mismanagement, or something more deliberate? Is it a regime strategy to displace, silence, and survive? Joining me today is Dr. Nasser Karami, climatologist and expert on Iran's environmental collapse.
About 90% of water in Iran is used by the agriculture, for the agriculture. And that's a military project, not a development project, not an economic project.
We'll explore what went wrong, why no one acted sooner, and whether this is still fixable, or if Iran's ecological crisis is now inseparable from its political one. I'm Negar Moshahedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Dr. Karami, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you.
Absolutely. Let's begin with where things stand right now, like just how bad things are. We've heard official warnings from Iran that Tehran could run out of water within 2 weeks. Obviously, that's very significant. But going beyond the headlines, what does that actually look like on the ground in terms of the cascading consequences of a capital city, running out of water, not just for public health, but for governance, for stability and society itself?
There is two types of issues here. One is I can accept the warnings, official warnings. Yes, this is drought. In the last year, rainfall was 40% less than normal. And also it wasn't the only drought in the last years. It was maybe in all of the 30 years. Somehow we had drought, maybe just in a few years. It was wet years. So this is drought. And also I have to add that Tehran has been increased in these years by area and by population. Metropole of Tehran. I mean Tehran, adding Tehran to Karaj and Varamin and a lot of the other cities close to the Tehran, in the neighboring Tehran, there is 25 million population. 25 million population, most of them living close to a big desert that don't offer any water. The water just comes from the Alborz mountain. And so there is a limited sources for the water for the Tehran and the other cities close to this city. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough investment by the government for the supplying water for this population. So we accept that. We predicted that year by year, the problem with the fresh water will increase in Tehran. That's the first thing. So this year we have the serious problem with the fresh water for the population, and that's necessary to people have some cooperation with the government with the decrease their consumption of water. But another type of issues, I think part of this is not true. Because,
what do you mean?
Example, this drought is the most severe drought in the last 100 years. It's not true. I'm a climatologist. At least in the last 50 years, about 17 years, the rainfall was more or less the same of this year. So it's not something very, very unpredicted or unusual drought. We used to face with this kind of drought. That's the first thing. Another thing is, I don't think there is not enough source for fresh water around the Tehran, because as far as I know, and there are some of my colleagues or my students told me, it's not something very unnormal, or in the, for example, the capacity of water in the dams around the Tehran. I think they can afford enough water for the Tehran for the future months until the autumn, when the rainfall for the new rainfall season will start. But why they announced this kind of the warnings?
Yeah,
I
and people
think,
are suffering as a result of the consequences and decisions the government has made from that.
I think there is a valve someplace they could open it, and it would be some more water in the pipes. But they put two things. I think because it has kind of the engineering drought. Engineering drought means there is water, but you have to pay a lot of money to produce it, to transfer it, to offer it to the citizens. So, if the citizen just a little decrease their consumption of water, it would be a lot of benefits for the government. Because
So they're using people, they're putting people in a vulnerable position, it sounds like, what you're saying.
Yeah. Because, the price of water is different. Price of water in the winter or in the spring is very cheap. In the summer is very high for the government. But the price in these two different seasons is the same. You don't in Tehran. You don't pay more money for water in the summer in compare with the winter. So it has a lot of benefit for them if the people reduce their consumption, and they have propaganda. They have kind of the public awareness projects on this matter, and using that, and that's a lot of media have some cooperation with them. So I think part of the is a bit exaggerating this kind of news.
So what you're saying essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the government of Iran has engineered this water crisis to a certain extent and is taking advantage now of vulnerable people so that they can benefit economically.
Yeah. That's completely true. Yeah.
Wow.
Again, I have to emphasize that is very good for environment and for water resources. We have cooperation with the government on this. We have to reduce our consumption of water. That's true. But there is not apocalypse 21 months later. There is not any very, very crucial conditions, for example, in the next few weeks or something like that. This is not true.
But what about the pressures then that everyday people are facing right now, and are saying that, water can't reach upper floors past the second floor of apartments, for example, of apartment buildings. In some areas, taps are dry for about 48 hours straight, or some people are, buying water tanks, the ones who can afford it and are lucky enough to be able to pay for that, to do such a thing. What about in terms of the conditions that people are living in right now?
Yeah, that's obvious, because as I said, the government has not paid enough attention to this kind of the matters. For example, for the water, for the air quality, for a lot of things. So water is one of the other things that Iran's government has not invested enough for that. So that's obvious. In the city like Tehran, there are a lot of skyscraper has been built in the west of Tehran, in the north of Tehran, even in the south of Tehran, and offering water to them is not easy. It's very difficult. It needs a lot of investment, and the government has not did that. So that's obvious. There is serious issues in that. I accept that, but I'm again repeat it. There is not apocalypse next month. Life will continue.
No, so I was going to say, so essentially there is that mismanagement, like you said. People are suffering as a result of these the rations and what the government itself is doing with this water crisis. But essentially, the main point you're making here is the government has engineered this water crisis for their own benefit, and this is fixable. It can be, things will turn around.
Yeah, easily.
Easily, eh?
Yeah. I think in the very short time, a bit cooperation of the people with the government. Maybe if you just 10% or 20% reduce their consumption, the problem will solve in the short time. And but in the long term, if the government just easily can make some, there is a lot of ways to use efficiency of consumption of water in the city. When I say efficiency, it's not just about the citizen. Also, it's about the government. It's about the governmental buildings. It's about a lot of things is involved in this matter. So and also there's a few opportunities to find new water resources for Tehran. But when I say
can it be found? Can it be found? New water resources?
Yeah. That's easily. Just you need to take part of the water from the agriculture part and give it to the for the fresh water for the citizen. That's very easy, because unsustainable agriculture has made all of this problem around the Tehran and other places in Iran. Unsustainable agriculture. About 90% of water in Iran is used by the agriculture, for the agriculture. And that's a military project, not a development project, not an economic project.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because, I mean, that was a stat that really shocked me. 90% used for agriculture, but only 14% of that is used for farmland. So you're saying military. Can you expand on that? Like, what is it actually being used for then?
We have previously, maybe when you've been a child in Iran going to the school, in the books you read that the annual average rainfall in Iran is 250 millimeter. Now it has decreased to less than 200. So now we have about annually 100 billion cubic meter water. That's kind of our income in water. The what is coming from the sky come from the Iran. 100 billion cubic meter per year. In the regarding the environmental criteria, we could use mostly 40% of this. That's mean 40 billion cubic meter for agriculture, for the industry, and for the fresh water for the citizens. Yeah, 60 the part as means 60 billion cubic meter has to go to the nature. Go to the rivers, go to the plains, go to the jungles, and for that. But in Iran, unfortunately, they use 90% of it. And also, okay, when just 10% of water going to the nature, 90% is stopped by the dams or by the another engineering investments to using the human. So. That's why Iran is the first country in soil erosion, in desertification, in landslide, in land subsidizing, a lot of problems like that. Unfortunately, as I always say that the main effect of Islamic Republic is not about politics, about culture, about the economy. It's about that. We are the first country in soil erosion. We are the first country in desertification. Just because of the project of the efficiency project of for the agriculture. They want to produce more than 90% of the population, Iran's population's foods in Iran. That is the same project in all totalitarian system. Anyway, the water, they are that 90% they are from the renewable waters they are using in the by human. 90% of that is using by agriculture, 5% for the fresh water for the citizen, and 5% for the industries. Yeah, the solution is you have to take part of the water from the agriculture and give it to the people. That is very easy.
And then, if it's so easy, why is this not happening then?
Because there is some issues here. That's, as I said, this is a military project. All the totalitarian system has experienced that because they say, okay, if it would be a war with our enemies, they will surround us. The main thing is if we could produce most of our food, okay, we could survive in that surrounding. So all of them, the first project for all of these totalitarian systems. I have a book on this, totalitarianism and environment. We have the exact experience in the North Korea, in the Soviet Union, in the Syria of Hafez Assad, in
I'll have
China.
to read that. It's very timely for what we're going through right now. I'll have to read that.
All have the same project. So you can see that, for example, after the Islamic Revolution, the farms has been getting doubled in the area. But Iran has this 7,000 years experience in agriculture. But the area that in Iran is using for the agriculture getting doubled just 45 years ago. Getting doubled just in the past from 7,000 years to 50 years was the exact amount, but it get doubled just 45 years ago. And for example, the wells, deep wells for the getting water from the underground, it was before the Islamic Revolution was just 40,000, but now is more than 1 million, more than 1 million. Or about the dams, or about a lot of things. They using all of water resources for agriculture to make enough food for the soldiers that want to fight with America, Israel, or USA, or another countries.
Really? That's shocking.
Yeah. It's exactly the same of the project Purput, Red Hammers. Red Hammers has been done in the Cambodia. You could see that. Just they have exactly the same project. They said, okay, we need just two things: soldiers to fighting with our enemies, and the people who produce rice as main food for that soldiers.
So this is a military totalitarian state of mind that is now affecting these policies that eventually hurt people in the end.
So that's, I think, the solving the problem of the water crisis in Iran is very easy. You have to, I think, at least 50% of agriculture in Iran has to stop. 50%. And that 50% will be remained. It should getting better conditions in the irrigation or in the cultivation plants, for example, cultivation models. Everything have to change. So if we do that in the future, it would be about 40 billion cubic meter more water. Most of it will go to the nature and will save our soil, will save our jungles, will save our ecosystems, and also part of it could use for the fresh water for the cities, big cities like Tehran. So easily, I think the problem could be solved. But for Islamic Republic, ideological projects is prioritized always.
That's at least that gives some hope. But then I'm curious why there's now regional negotiations underway. Talks with, I have here, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan and Uzbekistan for, in the meantime, to start importing water from there. Why would they resort to this if this is such an easy solution? Does this go back to what you're saying again, totalitarian, state and state of mind, essentially?
Actually, as far as I remember, it was some negotiation with Tajikistan and also Afghanistan.
Yes, that's correct.
Afghanistan for that. But there is a lot of money for that. For example, the main water resources of Afghanistan come from the Hindu Kush, and they have, regardless of Mashhad, another big cities have about 2,500 and 3,000 kilometers far from the Hindu Kush. Getting water from that area and bring it to the big cities in Iran, that's mean a very, very expensive water. It's not a cheap water. And also there is not good conditions in the Afghanistan to do this project. The negotiate with Taliban is not easy, particularly because the main water resources, rivers like Hirmand or and other rivers are in the south part of Afghanistan and come from the Pashtun people. It's not that easy. Maybe in the future they could do it if they have a lot of enough money to do this projects like this. But as far as I know, it's very expensive and it's not that easy.
Yeah, wouldn't it be then just more waste of money for Iran, an economy that's already struggling under sanctions? Wouldn't that be just more wasteful?
I think they can solve the problem with the fresh water, and also it just in the few days later, I think the problem will solve. You will see. It's not the warning people. That's the kind of
Hype, you're saying?
advertising behavior to scaring people to they reduce their consumption. I think the problem with the fresh water will solve, and Islamic Republic will continue life as usual. But they have not planned for 2 years.
The long term.
Long term for the future. Just for this few years, they are thinking about that. Particularly now, but they are just waiting for but they are going to the war with Israel. They have not planned for as you said, plan for the long term. Unfortunately.
And let's go back to that stat again, because honestly, I find it so fascinating, the over 90% for agriculture, like you said, then you said 5% for industry, 5% for civilian use around that. So out of that 90% of agriculture, how much of it is then used for farmland and other things within it? Can you break that down for us? Because you mentioned it's about making their own food for these soldiers and for a potential war with, as you said.
As I said,
just generally, if you could break it down.
Yeah, generally, 90% in agriculture means mainly for the farmlands, because agriculture in Iran is divided for the different things, but not, for example, for the gardens, for fruit gardens or something. Mainly for the cultivating wheat or something like that, rice or something like that. And as I said, because they said they are the essential things we need them, wheat or rice or something like that. 90% go for that. They refused it. The Ministry of the Energy, the ministry is responsible for the water resources, said no, this is less. Maybe they said, for example, 70% just the water go for the agriculture, or sometimes say 60% or something like that. But the independent researchers say no, this is 90%. This is 90% of renewable waters is going for them.
And you talked about how the government is trying to scare people into lowering their consumption rate of water. Today, the president of Iran on Thursday, Masoud Pezeshkian, said, quote, if we cannot manage and people do not cooperate in controlling water consumption, there won't be any water in the dams for September or October. If it's just 5% then that's civilian, why would it make such a difference if only 5% is coming from people? How can you explain that to us?
It's exactly what I said. I said it's not what they are going to say. They are just exaggerate the issue. Yes, that's good. People reduce their consumption of the water. It's good for environment, for our water resources. It would be less sewage, for example. But I think it's not as I said, it's not apocalypse next month or in the September or in the October. It's not any apocalypse. They can offer enough water to the citizens.
But then if it is just, even if it's not apocalyptic, like you said, if it is just 5% for people, how would that would it make such a big difference then in the overall consumption if people cut down? If it's only 5% and 90%, like you said, is agriculture, what difference can that small percentage really make?
Yeah, that's different. If 5% decrease in the share of the agriculture means about at least 4 billion cubic meters water. 5% in the agriculture. If you have for 4 million cubic or 5 milliard cubic meters, that means enough water for all of the Iran civilian, for all of the people in the agriculture. If you could get some water, just small portion of water from the agriculture and give it for the fresh water, the problem will solve. But why they said if the people just 10% decrease that? Because the problem is 10%. The problem is not that, for example.
So it's not that big, the problem is what you're saying to begin with.
Maybe you remember 1 month ago, they said Tehran have just 2 weeks water. After 2 weeks, everything will be, there won't be any drop of water in the pipelines. But it was a lie. We say, no, this is 1 month has passed from that news, but the water is still in the pipes.
Okay, interesting. So this goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of our conversation, that it's about the government trying to make more money and using people this way. And let's talk about inequality of access right now, even with these engineered conditions, like you argued. We've heard reports that Revolutionary Guards in West Tehran have no problem to access of water, uninterrupted water, while neighboring communities obviously are suffering from these daily cuts in the meantime. How common is this kind of unequal distribution, and how does it reflect this broader system of privilege in Iran?
Iran is a very big country with different type of geographical regions. We have some deserts in the south, some jungles in the north, mountainous areas, and access to water is very different. But unfortunately, the civilization in the plateau of Iran has been started in the plains, big plains, in the Fars province, in the Khuzestan province, or in the Sistan and Baluchistan province. Because in that time, 2,000 years ago, it was enough water in the plains. They had enough water, they had for the agriculture or for everything. But the water going to shortages of water getting harder and harder. So the people left the plains and coming closer and closer to the mountains. Now 80% of the Iran's population living somehow around the Alborz and Zagros, two long ranges of the mountain in Iran. People are living closer to this mountain have less problem with the water shortages. But if they getting distance from the mountains, the problem will getting harder and harder. For example, in the Kerman province, in the Hormozgan province, in the Sistan and Baluchistan, in the Khorasan, South Khorasan, particularly in the South Khorasan, the crisis of water is very, very, I can say that the conditions is very bad. Because of that, I made kind of a term about that. Somalization. The people are leaving their hometown. About 50% of the villagers in the South Khorasan or in the Baluchistan, even in the North Khorasan, in the Khorasan Razavi, in the Hormozgan, in the Kerman, has left their hometown in the last 10 years. 50%. They
That's
left
their
country and migrate to the cities, to other places in the north, for example, to the Mashhad, to the Kerman, or some other places. And because the region cannot offer more vital resources for the life. So that the problem in that area is very critical.
So ecological migration.
Yeah. And, the Sepah Pasdaran control the country. So there are a few population in that provinces, in the Sistan and Baluchistan, or in the South Khorasan, or there are not much population. There are not very big cities. So they don't care about the people there, because they cannot do anything against the government. But the Tehran is very important. Isfahan, Rash, Ahwaz, Tabriz, these are very big cities.
The major cities, yeah.
Yeah. So they try to solve the problem for these big areas, firstly.
Well, so originally, one of the questions I had prepared to ask you was, is this crisis, if you will, climate-driven or how much of it is homegrown? But now I have to ask you, how much of this is then engineered by the government of Iran itself?
Actually, I have I researched long term about this. I can say, effect of the climate change in Iran water resources is between 20 to 30%. 20 to 30%, because they has we been faced to climate two type of climate change. First, about the rainfall, 20% or between 20% to 25%, the rainfall has been increased in more or less in Iran. For example, in the Khuzestan, in the southwest is 30%, but maybe in the northwest, in the Urmia or in the Azerbaijan, is about 10 or 15% decrease in the precipitation. And also, but maybe more important, is increase about 2 to 25, 2 to 2.5 centigrade degree in the temperature, in the average of temperature. That's mean more evaporation in the water resources. So 20 to 30% is come from the climate change, but more than 70% come from the bad water governance, bad environment governance. As I said, the main thing is about the project of the government for the unsustainable agriculture, as I said. That's a rule in Iran. They want to increase the population to 150 million. They have planned for that. And also, that's another rule. This is not just a target, a goal. No, this is rule. They have issued it in their parliament, and they have ordered it by the Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, that the population should increase to 150 million, and 95% of food for this 150 million population should be produced in Iran, inside of Iran. Because of that, they spread out the unsustainable agriculture in Iran and using all of the water resources, soil resources just for this project, just specifically this project. And that ruined the country. At some part of the country, for permanently has been ruined. Permanently. We cannot do anything for that. For example, that was a jungle, now it's a desert now. It's not that easy you reverse this condition.
And what's their, I guess, for lack of a better term, kind of obsession with this policy then? Because you've got neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE that are importing and invested in importing their water. Why is Iran like this?
Actually, the Arabistan and Emirat has not planned to attack their neighbors. They has not planned to bring the flag of Islam to the White House or bring the flag of Islam to the Jerusalem. They have not planned for that.
That's a good explanation. And how much of this, I actually had a friend ask me that, nuclear requires a lot of water. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not too sure about that, but there is some water consumption for it. How much of this do you think would go to their nuclear projects?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? No?
No, I don't think so. I have not any statistics about that, but I never see anything about that in the reports on the water crisis in Iran. So I don't think it's a big has big effects on this matter.
And there's another stat that really shocked me too, and does all of this then explain why, for example, Turkey, in terms of population size, is comparable to the Islamic Republic of Iran, but yet Iran has double the amount of water consumption?
One of the, when we say the bad governance in the water issues, part of it is the bad consumption of water. I'm living in the Norway, and in the Norway there is water everywhere. If you turn this camera, you will see a big river. I'm living in.
I did, and it was beautiful. The lighting wasn't good, so we had to change, but it was very lovely.
Also, 100 in the distance from in the south part is the fjord, and the 200 in this another lake. But the water consumption is something expensive, and there are a lot of establishment things in the home to use the water in the best ways, in the best efficiency. But in Iran, I come from the Khuzestan, and my hometown in Khuzestan. No, that wasn't anything. We use water just, 40% of water in the agriculture and also in the fresh water just wasted, because we have not suitable instrument to irrigation in the agriculture, and also for transferring water to the city. Just 40% is lost, is wasted just when you transfer water from the source to the homes.
So what is your forecast then in the next weeks to come and months to come? It sounds like you think things are going to be fixed, and this likely will not lead to people rising up and protests, et cetera, et cetera. What's your forecast?
Okay, that's a story. Year by year they repeat it. In this time they said, okay, everything is going to ruin and we will be die and we will stay thirsty. But after a few weeks, they said, okay, we are strong here. We have solved problem for you. It was a serious problem, but we solved it. But when they say we solved it, that means the water, the clouds that come from the Atlas Ocean come in the Atlantic Ocean come in the above of Iran and start the autumn rainfall. So I think this problem with the water in this summer will solve soon. Soon, I mean maybe a few weeks later. But the water crisis in Iran will stay as the main issue for this country, and as a main issue that will destroy this country. And that is very bad news.
And what is the one thing, Dr. Karami, that you want our audience to get out of this episode, if you could summarize it in a sentence or two, the one kind of main point that you would like to highlight out of all of this, our discussion today?
I always say that. The main effect of Islamic Republic in Iran is not... I know Islamic Republic has executed thousands of people. I know they have run a very destructive war for Iran, with Iraq, with Iran, and with Israel. But we will forget all of this in the future years, maybe 100 years later. But 100 years, even 1,000 years later, we will stay in some place in the desert. We will say, here was a jungle. Here was a good, very beautiful ecosystem, was ruined 1,000 years ago by a government named Islamic Republic. The main effect of Islamic Republic is that they are destroying this country by these things, mainly by using waters just for a military project for agriculture.
That's so sad. Just to end off, the name of your book and where people can find it. Can they get off of Amazon?
My book is Environment and Totalitarianism. Environment and Totalitarianism.
Thank you so much. That was a very enlightening conversation. Dr. Nasser Karami joining us today on Eye for Iran.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed your question.
Well, you can sign up for our weekly briefing newsletter at iranintl.com/newsletter. We deliver what you need to know with top stories, key analysis, and exclusive reports direct to your inbox. And if you like this episode, hit the like button. Also, leave us a comment. We'd love to know what you think. The Eye for Iran podcast series is brought to you by Iran International, your go-to destination for expert Iranian news in both Farsi and English. For more, head to our dedicated English website, iranintl.com/en.